Alright, we're here today and I'm going to discuss some trap modifications that I've made to some number 2 bridgers. Basically they're going to come from the factory like this one I've got right here, with the exception of the base plate, and this import chain is going to be on there. I've actually taken that off already. To do that, you just have to pop the springs loose, drop the levers, and then I get a pair of vice grips and squeeze the jaws together and pull them out, and you can pull it off of this piece right here. It's just on this part right here, or actually it's actually up under here between the lever and the frame of the trap. I don't like the import chain. I don't like the import swivels. You catch a big coyote in them. I have had a import chain to snap before, and I'm not a real happy camper when I come up there and I got a $20 plus trap that's gone due to faulty chains. So what I do is replace them with number 2 US straight link chain. You can see here, base plated, MB crunch proof swivel, 8 inches of number 2 chain, another swivel, and then I've got 18 inches of chain with a welded S hook and a fin super stake on the bottom. And I'll go back, haven't done it yet, but I'll go back and put me a piece of 3/16 cable on here to pull the stakes with. You can pull them. A lot of people just hook a puller to them and pull them with the chain from this piece, but it's just as easy to hook a cable to them. I do like the chain better than the cable on the stakes, because especially like with Georgia red clay, if you can't drive that stake all the way in the ground up to the swivel, if you've got cable on it, then you've got, you may have 4 or 5 inches of cable sticking out of the ground, and it makes bedding the trap really difficult. Trap tag, I just put them around that swivel. You can put them around this one, but I don't like to do that, because sometimes if you get a coon or something in it and it's a bright swivel, I have had them chew the tag off. As far as the other modifications that I've done, if you can see this, if it'll focus right, bubble tip the jaws. If you can see, I don't know if you can see it. Basically all that is I use a wire welder and just strike a small bead on the end of each tip of each jaw. And what that does is, if you get a big coyote or something in it and it's really bouncing and pulling on those jaws, it will keep it from pulling the jaws back through. I know some of the Victors, older Victors, the number 2 square jaws, if you got a good coyote in that, you can pretty much forget it, because it's going to rip it apart. Welded base plate on the bottom, welded each side, all the way across right there. And all I do is just lay it on a vise and line the base plate up on the bottom, clamp one end of it with a pair of vice grips and weld it, then clamp the other end down tight and weld it. And the end over here on the side that's got the hole in it, that's to put a side swivel in, if you want to swivel it from the side instead of the center of it. On those, I actually went on each side of it and just tacked a small bead on each side of it, just to get a little bit more strength. And if you can see up under the D-ring right here, this frame basically makes kind of like a crosshair. You got one piece going vertical and another one going horizontal that hooks the jaws in, and I've just went through and welded that together. It comes from the factory with 2 rivets in the bottom of it to hold it, and you can either weld it from the top side or you can weld it from the bottom side. It's really not going to make much difference. And to be honest with you, the rivets probably will hold it just fine, but while I had the welder out, I figured, might as well go ahead and tack that while I'm at it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to laminate the jaws. There are 2 different ways that you can laminate them. I've got an example of both here. One of them is just a 3/16 rod, and you can see, you know, welding is not the prettiest in the world, but I'm going to have to clean that up a little bit. But basically, just weld that on there. I'm going to do 6 of them like that, and I'm going to do the other 6 like this with the flat metal. This is 1/8 inch thick, 1/2 inch wide, flat stock, and I've got 1 piece on the outside, and I've got 1 piece on the bottom, on the inside. And that just makes the jaws a little bit thicker. And if you can see on the dog right here, it's actually, it's hard to see with the camera, but the dog is just barely free of touching that 1/8 inch piece. If you use a piece of 3/16, I believe the dog's going to contact it, because you can see on this trap right here, it is doing that. If you can see it, let me get away from this table and see if I can get this thing to focus any better. And it's not really wanting to focus too good, but you can see right there that it's actually hitting the lamination on the outside with that 3/16 rod. It may affect it, it may not, just depends. I don't like it touching it, because I like to be able to adjust the dog. Sometimes if you got a good enough play in the dog, you can actually push it in, and it will help lower the trap pan to get it inside the jaws. You can see from the factory, these dogs are actually a little bit long, and you can see how that pan's actually sticking up above the jaws. I haven't done anything to the dog or the pan tension on this as it comes from the factory, and you can see how much that pan moves, and that trap still has not fired. I mean, you can see right here on the bottom, you only have maybe another 1/4 inch or so to go before it bottoms out on the trap. And I actually have a couple of stock traps from the factory that I pushed the pan all the way down on, and they won't even fire. So you're going to have to file some off on the dog. And this one I have filed off on the dog, and as you can see, it still sticks up just a little bit, but it's not too awful bad. Let me see. Actually, that one I filed on that dog, I actually filed it a little bit too short, so that's why it's sticking up. But look on this one right here. See how flat that one is? That's about how you want it. You want you want your pan pretty much level. That way it's not sticking up. The higher it sticks up, the more dirt you're going to get up under it. But I'll show you if I can do this without tearing my finger all to pieces. After we file that down, just show you how much pan movement we got. Okay, the pan still hasn't moved at all. Alright, as soon as it starts to move, that trap fires. And that's pretty much what you want. You don't want a whole lot of movement in that pan, or that animal's going to feel that pan move, and then he's going to step off and probably dig your trap up, or either he's going to pull his foot up and you're going to get a toe catch. To weld these on, I take a piece of flat metal and stick it between the jaws, and then I'll stick these rods on and clamp them on each side right here, and right here with a set of vice grips. And I'm going to tack this in, and I'm going to tack this in. And then once you've got that secured, then you can come back and run your bead in the middle. And what that does with this piece of metal in there is it keeps that lamination straight flush with the edge of the jaws. That way when it closes, you're making contact with the lamination and the jaws. And that's what you want. Same thing over here with these. I put that piece of metal inside the jaw frame, and I line this flat stock up with it, clamp it down with some vice grips, and drill a hole in it. In each end, I drill a hole in each end, and then put the rivets in it, and then I'll go back and drill one in the middle. So, you know, basically the same type thing. Now these jaws do have just a little bit of arc to them, so if you use the flat stock, you're going to have to get your flat stock in a vise. You don't have to clamp it down in it, but you can open it up just a little bit and slide it down in it, and either bend it or tap it with a hammer just a little bit in the middle to get the arc in it. Once it gets pretty close, you're good to go. The rivets will pull it down when you get it good and tight. If you're going to use double laminations on the outside and inside, come right here on the ends and clamp those down tight with your vice grips before you put the rivet in, and that'll get them good and tight. And you can see about how much my rivets are sticking out. You don't want a 1/2 inch or so sticking out of your rivets if you use those. You can either rivet it or weld it. I just chose to rivet it that way. If I decide I want to take the inside lamination off, all I gotta do is drill a rivet out, pop it out, and then I can either weld the round rod back on it, or I can come right through here and tack this end of it. The other thing is a modification I've done on the pans. You can see they come with 0 pan tension from the factory, and they're just wobbly as crap. You've got a good bit of distance between the frame that the pan sits in. So what I've done is I went and got some number 8 brass washers. Just get them at Lowe's or Home Depot, and you can see it on this trap, maybe if it's camera focused. All I do is take the pan out, get a screwdriver and slide it between those levers, and just bend it out enough to where you can slide a washer in between the inside frame and the pan mount. Then you can slide that screw through there, put the other washer on the outside, and put your bolt on it. And then you can clamp it, then you can set your pan tension. And what that washer does is it keeps these straight, so when you tighten it, you've got tension all the way around the pan instead of just up here on the top edge. Because if you don't put that washer in, it's going to crimp. As you tighten it, those mounts are going to close in at an angle, and you're just going to have pressure on the top side. Some people may like that. I don't. It gives more uniformity in the pan. And some of these, you may have to go over and bend the pan one way or the other to get it centered in the trap. Then you just set your pan tension. I always work my trap pan, just work it up and down after you tighten your bolt, because sometimes it will work loose, and you can feel it as it comes up. It's going to have some play in it until it's got about a 1/4 inch, 1/8 to 1/4 inch of play in it until it actually catches. It's just the bigger hole they drilled in the pan than the screw. You can put a bigger screw in, the bigger brass screw in there to kind of take some of that play out too. But those are some of the modifications that I've done to the Bridger number 2s. If you got any questions or anything, just feel free to let me know. I'll try to answer them, or if you got some better ideas, I'm always open to learn some new stuff too. And I will 4-coil these. I'm actually going to use MB Minnesota brand 4-coil springs on these. As some other people have said on there, these Bridger springs aren't the best in the world. They're not good as a music wire spring or some of your other springs. They're kind of slow. So especially when you laminate them, you're going to want to at least 4-coil them, or maybe swap the springs out. The one thing I do like about the Bridger springs is the L up here. And what that does is it helps to put some pressure on this side of the jaw if you're not using 4-coil springs. But that way it helps keep these jaws level, because if not, over time, if you just got pressure on this side of the spring, it's going to start to move your lever, and you're going to get cock-sided levers. Now, I've noticed a lot of my older Victor traps are like that, so I've had to go back and swap some levers out, or either 4-coil them and try to keep them up there. But another thing you could do if you wanted to is come in here and run your shock spring, like a Pitt 18 shock spring or something like that. You could do, all sort of different stuff. But if I'm going to use a drag, I'll take this J-hook out right here and just put a quick link in it. And my drags are made like this, 8 foot of number 2 USA chain. And then I've actually got a link out of a bigger chain that I just welded to the drag. And that just helps this chain kind of, gives you an attachment point, and to let it free move on the on the drag as it goes. If you wanted to, you could put a swivel in the drag. I don't put any swivels, you know, in the drag. I've got 2 up here, but it's just personal preference as far as to whatever you want to do. Hope y'all enjoyed it.